Oh, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you're able to tune into this birthday special conversation. My name's Dave Sleet. I'm co-founder of ANA Psychological Accreditation, and I'm joined by APA's fellow co-founder and CEO, Siobhan Crosby. Siobhan, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm alive. I am resilient. I pick myself up every day and I keep going. So that's how I am right now, picking myself up every single day and keeping on going.
Well, it's been a tumultuous week around the UK for sure. And I know you've been extremely busy with client work and haven't had a chance yet to kind of do one of the birthday conversations. But this week has been APA's third birthday week. How have you kind of felt about APA's kind of journey so far?
I think the journey of any change takes time. And what I've seen in the last week in relation to all our birthday videos is the support from the right people is in place. And that for me is the most important thing. Having people feel accepted for who they are, encouraged to be allowed to make it easier on them in ways of different processing, I think is so important and so underestimated. And I've listened to the birthday videos because yes, you're right, I'm snowed under right now. And I'm trying to keep all my eggs in 28 baskets, if you like, to try and get through it all. And it is a lot for me to manage, but I've managed more, so I'm okay. But seeing what the information coming out with the videos and the thoughts and the feelings, it makes me proud to have wanted to start something that actually will and does make a difference to people. And that's something that makes me really feel quite happy because it's lovely. It's lovely to hear people really acknowledge that how we are working and what we've created is completely different to so many organizations out there. And in truth, if we can't make the world of mental health easier for our peers, never mind what we're trying to do and make it easier for clients, then it kind of defeats the object. So I am very proud of what we've achieved. I think the feedback is always, all the time, you're consistent, you're open, you're transparent, you're willing to help, you're accepting. And for me, that's what I am as a person, as a therapist. And that's what I want APA to represent, an easier way of being and a healthier and more accessible organization. And I think that's the thing I love probably the most, the accessibility of what we provide, because I know, like everybody else on the planet, trying to get a hold of somebody in an organization can be impossible. It can actually be impossible. Having an open session every single Thursday to allow people to know who I am, but to appreciate their value. Because for me, that's overall, we can't do it alone. It's the ethos of therapy. The client can't do it on their own, the therapist can't do it on their own, we do it together. The ethos of the APA, it follows the same ethos of doing it together because it's teamwork, and with a great team around us, we're on our way. We are on our way. And you're right, there's so much going on at the moment. It's all a bit crazy, but I just take a nice deep breath that signifies why oxygen works so beautifully. It'll be okay, and we'll continue to grow, and we'll continue to develop, and we'll continue to help people, and people will eventually see and are seeing that actually what we're doing is quite scary for a lot of people that don't really want this kind of system in place. So, and when you know that people are a little bit scared of what you're doing, you know and you hear daily you must be doing something right. So I believe we are, and it's working in our favor. What about you, though, as the co-founder? How have you felt about the last 3 years?
I think, like you, when we kind of had that crazy moment at the end of a retreat in 2018 that kind of said we could do this. we can look at how these systems work, and we can do something that replicates that relationship between the professional and the client, and have that for the professional and their support platform. And we were very clear, I think, in those early conversations that this was about creating a support platform rather than trying to be anything that had been done before, and when we looked at all of the information, and it was very clear, it was a bit like, variations of Coca-Cola, for want of a better analogy. You've got Coca-Cola, then you've got Coke Diet, you've got Coke Zero, you've got Coke Sugar Free, but ultimately everything that has gone before APA was a variation of a singularity. And what we were able to create was something that was so completely different from that approach and that model, that became the APA way very quickly. And I think the APA way was actually coined by one of our earliest members. And that has really stuck, that over the last 3 years, the APA way has become a kind of benchmark for making a difference, not just being a change. And that, I think, is something that has really stuck with me. And like you, this week, hearing the conversations and hearing that feedback live as it comes in has been very, very humbling. But it's also been hugely inspiring, because we're seeing how other people who are outside of the core of APA are engaging with what we've created. And that is hugely inspiring. It does make me kind of miss you when you're not in those conversations. But it also highlights how APA stands kind of in clear water from what else is around. And that's something that I will hold on to. And it comes back to what you discovered in the name A&A. Torchbearers, mavericks, bringers of change is exactly what APA does. And long may that continue. But I do believe 100% that what we have created and what our membership has grown in the atmosphere that's created around APA is that torch-bearing kind of evolution, going into the places that no one wanted to go into before, shining a light on what's really in those dark places, and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, which is, in essence, the journey every client goes through.
Absolutely. And as anyone experienced understands, that when you go round and round and round with the same systems that eventually reflect that they don't actually work, changing and creating an intervention and creating different is what actually changes the systems themselves. In the same way that clients work to change the patterns of behaviour that they're in, and rather than going round and round and round, they actually start to think differently. They actually start to recognise their feelings, process their feelings differently, and an organic shift takes place. And if I'm honest, this replicates, if you like, my private practice. I do have a really busy private practice, but it is based on integrity, it's based on honesty, it's based on consistency, it's based on transparency, it's based on valuing the people that sit in front of me, because I admire anyone that actually says to themselves, I need to do things differently. And the only way I'm going to know how to do that. And most clients don't actually think like that. Most clients think, I need help, let's reach out, let's get it. But actually in that moment that they're doing that, they're actually saying, I need to do things differently. And on the basis of that, the work itself and their organic changes that take place through the therapy turn into the most wonderful, pleasurable. It's almost very powerful to hear somebody, and not somebody, so many people that I work with, going from feeling a particular way to me seeing them as leaders of their own life in sometimes really quite powerful positions, and yet still determined to hold on to the integrity that they've never let go of from the moment that I've met them to where they are. And if there's one thing that I love about being a therapist and how APA echoes that, it is the value of those people that want different. And truth be told, I guess it comes from a very personal place in myself, being perceived as different. Red hair, girl, Irish Catholic family, you do get treated differently in a lot of ways to a lot of, if you like, the opposite gender. So, you know, for me, difference has followed me through my entire life. You know, I might as well be labelled different in my own family because that's the perception. And you know what? I'm actually quite proud of being different because I was never very good at being a sheep that hid in a flock. I'd rather be the person that led them over the Grand Canyon safely. But that's me. That is me, and that's very much how I see it. And APA, I think, considering, I mean, most people have no idea what goes on in the background of our lives, and the work and the effort and the determination and the motivation, and it's been tough. Nobody can say, and I won't say it to you and pretend it hasn't been tough. We've been through some really, really, really tough times in the last 3 years, but ultimately plowing through those things and trying to come out the other side in the best way that we possibly can, no matter what's come up and what's happened. It is, to me, a testimony to what we feel about what we're achieving, but most importantly, hearing what other people have to say is, it's kind of remarkable for me. It's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, we kicked off this week with some thanks to the personalities that are around APA and kind of giving credit where it's due to our ambassadors and to our core team. And as kind of the birthday week comes to a close, I think it's worth pointing out and kind of drilling down a little bit on something that you said at the beginning of the week and something that you kind of intimated at today, is that we can't do this without the professionals that join us. Because in creating the selection process in the way that we have, and again, this is something that I think you're right, those that are afraid of being judged, those that are afraid of being kind of in the space of, I do the work and then I go home and I don't take that coat of congruence, you know, with me, they will stay away from APA, won't they?
Yeah, we realised this quite early on. You know, APA is about quality, not quantity. And I'll say that first and foremost. And secondly, we have an assessment that effectively means people will pick up the phone and speak to another human being. Now, it might sound really odd to a lot of people, that a lot of people will run away from that. Yet they're running businesses, they're working with clients, they're doing things that are interacting with other people. And actually, it's not our way to tear people apart. It's our way is to encourage, support, educate, and understand what people are like, how they utilize their self-awareness. Because over the years, over 20 years of practicing, meeting people on and off, thousands of professionals during that time, I have met some incredible individuals that really are passionate about what they do, and the authenticity and integrity that they hold and the recognition of responsibility you can't fault. No. But there's always the other kind, and the other kind would always balk at feeling like they're going to get caught out or that we're going to tear them to pieces, and ironically, it's not myself that does the assessments, it's actually our assessors that do the assessments. And more importantly, it's not an assessment to hurt people, it's an assessment to get to know that person.
Yeah.
And when you get to know that person, it tells you an awful lot about who they are. So it's a process, but it's one that I hope over time more and more people will become comfortable with. And the people that have objected to this, and I know that there's a lot of objections to this, then I would say, why do you object to actually having a discussion with somebody? What is it you think we're actually doing? Because actually all we're doing is getting to know you. That's all.
And this is something that I think when we speak to the assessors that carry out those conversations, and I'm delighted that I have been able to be part of that when our assessors are too busy in their own practices to be able to engage with that. But when we speak to them and their feedback and the enjoyment that they have from having those conversations with new members, it's phenomenal. And then when you speak to the new member about their experience of that process, how much they enjoy being able to have that as well. And yes, there is that kind of initial uncomfortability, but that's part of the process. Because when a client comes into the room, there should be a degree of uncomfortability in not knowing what the client is actually going to bring. And by replicating that in the safest possible way, I think showcases the professional's capacity to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
And that applies to a huge part of the therapeutic process. I do find as people get more experience, their discomfort with the not knowing actually lessens over time, because you get so comfortable with the discomfort that it becomes something that's not really uncomfortable anymore. You know, but that takes time, and that takes practice, and that takes real confidence in who you are and knowing that you can manage. Now, obviously, you know, when I talk, certain things pop into my head. I am aware that I work in a public building. So I am also aware that I talk to anyone who's coming for a client session before they actually come in. So what just popped into my head is the discomfort can be much greater if you haven't got the protection of even being in a public building. You're inviting somebody into your home, yet they might have rung you up and said that they're coming in relation to sexual offences, and you just don't know. So I find, you know, environments are really quite important, because somebody could actually be really quite uncomfortable about having that kind of discussion, and then having that person actually in their home where they practice. You know, for me, once upon a time, I did it between home and having a public practice. I didn't actually do that for too long, because I preferred the I guess the ability to walk out the door. And although you're holding people in your mind, walking out that door is like a psychological closing of those sessions. Whereas I found, and do find, even when I'm at home and do online sessions now, between appointments, I like to at least try and get up, go out to the garden for, even if it's just, I don't know, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, is irrelevant, to just break up that, if you like, getting up and being in the home. So, you know, but everybody I see face to face is in a public building, and based on the dynamics around who can come to therapy, and most people will come where they're not harmers of others, the majority of people, but you'll always find one person that will ring you up, and I've certainly experienced it myself, and there's not been any issues, but the discomfort of maybe knowing that somebody's coming along and they are an offender in some way, shape or form can actually be really quite uncomfortable for people. But this is why I'm such an advocate of supervision, because supervision helps, guides, supports, nurtures, and every good supervisor knows, if you like, how to manage that dynamic and how to help that person. And I can honestly say I owe so much to my supervisor, who's currently working with me at the moment, but also everybody I think knows me and knows the way that I think about supervision. Adrian Pennington was one of the best supervisors you could wish for on this planet. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here. So yes, I totally see where you're coming from.
And the fact that as a voluntary support platform, being able to advocate those elements of supervision, of awareness around the dynamics of how somebody practices and where they practice is very different to what's been before, in the sense that you can be told that you need these things and you can be given tips and tricks, but to be supported in achieving that, having kind of the emergency support if you need it, is something very, very unique. And I think when we look at what professional bodies have traditionally kind of presented to professionals, sometimes the support element has been missing.
I can honestly say, having been attached to certain memberships myself before, it's going to sound awful, but when you're paying an amount every single month and you get really, it's all based on academia for starters, so it's not actually based on your ability to be self-aware, because nobody can judge that by a piece of paper. You know, you have to have direct communication to be able to understand somebody's level of self-awareness. But I can honestly say throughout the years, I've needed multiple different versions of supports from my own membership along the way. And obviously I'm not referring to APA, I'm referring to my previous membership. And I can remember thinking, what do I actually get? What do I actually get for £100 and something? I know I get a logo, but actually I'm private practice and I'm permanently busy. So the logo isn't how I get clients. And more to the point, I get a nice magazine once a month. To me, the value is that. I mean, a magazine costs £2 something. I'm paying for the most expensive magazine on the planet every single month. You know, and that's how I began to see it. And being very politically involved in the world of therapy, and having taken part in the last winning resolution against an organisation that was a voluntary organisation, and then understanding the repercussions of that, winning that actually did more damage to the members that were involved in that. And I become completely disheartened, recognised in totality the level of coercion, manipulation, because I realised that actually most organisations are not run by practicing therapists. Most organisations out there are run by business people that do not necessarily understand the world of mental health, whereas actually we do. And having that experience behind me makes me want people not to sit there like me and go, what am I getting for my money? I'm paying for the most expensive magazine on the planet per month. I want people to be in a position where they feel supported, where they feel they have access to instant help. Sometimes having a different supervisor just for 1 hour can teach you so much about somebody else, because it's all about who we know and what information that they give us. I know when somebody is teaching me something that I don't know. Having the availability to be able to go to somewhere and talk to somebody else as a supervisor, which is part of one of our benefits of APA, which is 2 hours free supervision per annum, and that's part of the membership. Giving them the option just to try another supervisor can have a profound impact, because the more people we know, the more education we get, or not, as the case may be.
Yeah.
Or we begin to be able to differentiate between, I can learn something off this person, or actually all I'm doing is really not learning what I want to learn from the person that I'm working with, you know, and how can I learn something from somebody else? This gives people options, it gives people choices.
Yeah.
And for me, I think I am ridiculously proud of what we've done. I'm ridiculously proud of every member that's joined, because those are the leaders of mental health. They may not see themselves like that, but they are the leaders of mental health. They want change. They believe in the ethos of therapy being taken out of the therapeutic space and placing it into the wider society. And in truth, considering what the systems are at the moment, which everybody knows how awful the systems are, the suicide rate is extortionate. It is devastating that we're not in a more stable world of mental health, and that the collaborations either aren't there, or with us, they are within our membership. That's where we collaborate with, because those people have the best information. They're working on the ground. They understand. And for me, APA was ultimately created to make peers' lives easier, create a joined up thinking, reduce the financial stress on people in relation to accreditation, and actually be able to support people in a way that I would like to be supported. You know, so for me, everything is about making a system that is viable for not just the clients, but also peers, also emergency services, also social services, also coaches. If we have a joined up thinking, we can help each other. And isn't that really what life is about? Learning to trust other people and help other people, but ultimately trusting yourself too.
Yeah.
That's what APA is.
So as we kind of head into the next year and kind of all of the frameworks that APA have built, and I think it's probably worth touching on some of those for anyone that hasn't been following APA as yet. So we have the psychological paramedic process that has been included with the work of Mental Health Change in creating the 115 solution. And that's really to aid the NHS 111 service, isn't it?
It is. We recognise, and bear in mind my private practice, I'm on the ground with this. I know how utterly despairing it is for people to have doors closed on them day after day after day. You know, to know that, I mean, it's so sad to know that the systems mean that if you are not literally on the verge of jumping off a bridge, half the time you don't even warrant help. You know, it's almost like you have to be there, which the whole point is catching people before they get there. And I find our world very sad, because it is the world of mental health, and it is the most important world on the entire planet, because it's our minds that create synergy with other people. It's our minds that are capable of creating synergy within ourselves. And to not have the availability to be able to help people is just despairing. And it's because of the entire systems that are out there. You know, for me, I know people dislike it when I say the waiting lists are leading to people dying, but it's fact.
Yeah. The evidence, if we look at what the NHS itself has said, certainly for England and Wales, in I think it was 2019, 2020, the year of measure, the 301,000 calls were made to 111 that were assessed by their call handlers as mental health only related. But of that 301,000 people, and let's remember, we're talking about people. These are 301,000 lives that were reaching out at a point of need. Whatever the system says about the grading of that need, to that person, that need was there, right then. Only 1% of those people ever made it to speak to a qualified therapeutic professional. 1% of 301,000 lives. Now, the NHS has started to record deaths by suicide while waiting for mental health services. Now, that's quite telling, in that there is an acknowledgement of why some of those people didn't get to see a professional. because they'd already made their own intervention in the worst possible way. And what the 115 project really does create is an acceptance of psychological paramedics that come from the qualified therapeutic arena. But when we spoke to the NHS directly about this and what the 115 project could produce, their initial reaction to that highlighted a very big problem that's a lot wider than the 111 service, wasn't it?
To my dying day, I won't actually forget this one man's words, because when I said to him, there is no governing body in this country, there is an army of qualified professionals ready to work, and his response was, what do you mean? Where is this army? Where is this army that you talk about? I put adverts out, the recruiters put adverts out, we're desperately trying to fulfill those positions. Where is this army that you talk about? And when I explained to him the reason he couldn't see that army was because he believed in a tiny pool of people that were actually attached to a governing body, which they weren't. And that was the pool that they recruit from. And because that pool of people is so small, of course he's not going to be able to fulfill the positions that he's advertising and getting the recruiters to do on his behalf. Whereas actually, I find it unbelievably shocking that we are the only profession in this country that is not recognised at the point of qualification as being qualified. We're literally the only profession. Yet mental health services are in dire straits. So it needs a recognition, because we all want standards. It's not about APA saying, let's just let anybody practice with anybody and it doesn't matter what they have and what they haven't got. It's not about that at all. They absolutely have to have a diploma in counselling and psychotherapy. That diploma has to be 450 hours study led. That diploma has to involve supervision. That diploma has to involve placement. And even placement practices need to change and need to get tightened up in relation to how they trust the trainees that are working with them. The truth of the matter is the entire systems need changing. But it's also about recognising the most important aspect of being the best therapist you can be, and most importantly, recognising for your own life too, is getting therapy yourself. When you understand yourself, you will understand clients in the best way that you possibly can.
Yeah.
When you understand yourself, you can separate rather than defend from what is going on for your client. And when you leave your therapy space, you carry that self-awareness, and it's an amazing, profound attribute to have. And I know it saved my life. So for me, drumming home, get your own therapy as a therapist, above all else, is the most important aspect of being the best therapist you can be for yourself, but also for the clients that are sitting in front of you.
Yeah. So that bottleneck that is restricting recruitment, I think it's worth pointing out, because we've heard membership organisations and other voluntary support platforms make statements about the requirement of extra funding being made available in order to reduce the waiting lists. Yet what we don't hear from anywhere but APA, it would seem, is that the NHS is currently recruiting across the UK about 10,000 jobs that require a level 4 diploma or above. Yet, let's wind back a second. 10,000 jobs. 10,000 jobs that are already advertised, that have already got the funding for those salaries in place. This isn't about needing more money. The NHS has got the money to fill those 10,000 jobs that they believe is required to cut the waiting lists. What's holding that up is this idea that you can only work for the NHS if you are accredited or affiliated to a charity. And that is costing lives when those charities are denying any public display that they are not a governing body, and therefore they cannot be used as a restriction on employment. Now that, if we were talking about that being done in any other country, we would call it corruption.
Yeah,
because there is a financial benefit to the charity of that system being in place. But it's a pseudo control. It's not the charity that picks up the pieces when something goes wrong. It's actually the employer that does its own control management when things go wrong, and then they inform the charity. So if the charity was doing the pickup, you could understand it. But for them to be authorized to do that, they would have to be a governing body. And a governing body cannot be a charity. A charity cannot be a governing body. They are a voluntary support platform. And if it's voluntary, you cannot mandate affiliation. You cannot restrict recruitment. You cannot hold a bottleneck over people's lives. So the 115 system, when it was presented to the NHS, highlighted exactly how bad that situation is. And the NHS were, as Vonnie pointed out, completely in the dark because they have been misled by voluntary support platforms.
It is time that a change is created. And I'm going to really summarize everything that you've just said, because I know that it's important to hear a summary. First of all, there is no governing body in this country. Secondly, the feedback from APA is absolutely amazing. Thirdly, our criteria is not just based on academia, it is based on the person's recognition of who they are themselves as well, because we know that that makes them the best practitioners on the planet. And I could go on and on and on, but I will wrap up by saying thank you. Thank you to every single member that we've had for celebrating with us this week. And thank you for David for all your hard work. Thank you to our marketing director who does all the work behind the scenes. Thank you to our website developer, Darren, who knows perfectly well that he picks up the pieces for us left, right and centre, our accountants, but most of all, the people that are leaders and mavericks that want to see an intervention and change in the world of mental health, that see it for the truth that it is. Everything we say is truth, and that's about transparency, that's about integrity, and that's what makes a business work. That's what makes people feel valued, and that's what APA represents. So I'd like to wrap this up and say thank you very, very much for your time today, David. Thank you very much for all the effort that you put in my absence. I'm well aware of how busy I am. And what would you like to say as a final word on everything we talked about today?
You give me goosebumps. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that's been involved in APA, in supporting both Siobhan and myself, because we can't do this as individuals. APA can't do this as a singularity. This does take an entire sea change of approach. And APA is very much at the forefront of responding to what is going on in the real world and not holding on to the antiquity of the past. I want to say a massive thank you to our members overseas, who probably have the toughest of scenarios to play with, because they are dealing with not just APA's way of working, but they're also doing that sometimes in places where English is not the primary language. And that's worth pointing out as well. APA is very much an international support platform, because psychology doesn't carry a passport. There are no borders. So I think it's vital that we highlight that fact. And my last comment on this, as we go into our next year of operations, is to you, Siobhan. You have led an organization into existence. You have created a framework and an environment that allows professionals to excel in themselves so that they can excel with their clients. And for that, I will always be immensely impressed. You have done more than can ever be thanked for. You have done more for me as an individual. You have done more for me as a professional. You have done more for me as a partner in the way this whole operation works than I think can ever be put into words. And that will, until, you know, carve it on the stone at the end. All right. I will always be so totally impressed by your foresight and your capacity to support growth in others. And as you say, that stems from your own self-awareness, and that's phenomenal. So thank you.
That made me actually feel quite emotional, but bearing in mind I'm on screen, I'm holding and containing as I was always taught to do. Thank you, David, but thank you to you too. I know your health has not been easy lately, but you have ploughed on through and you have done a remarkable job of keeping things going when I'm not there to support you, and I'm well aware of that. So thank you to everybody involved in APA, and I'm going to leave this now because I'm very aware of what my feelings are coming up in me. So take care, God bless, and stay safe.
For everyone else, thank you. Take care. See you soon.